Hey, I'm Braden. I'm with Service out of DryAir Manufacturing in St. Bruce, Saskatchewan.
I'm Cody. I'm out of Ohio, service for the US.
We're going to be talking about DryAir's ground thaw units today. This one is a 650 model. We're going to go through a couple things with you. The generator and power. We're going to talk about the control panel and electronics in it. We're going to talk about the burner, air and fuel preheating, as well as the hose reel.
So like we were saying, this is our 650 ground thaw unit. This is not considered a boiler. It is 35 PSI or lower, and it's open to the atmosphere. Another couple of things that make us a little different is we preheat our air and fuel. And the reason we do that is less maintenance on your burner and less maintenance on your exchanger. Another thing that we offer is a flow reverser. And the flow reverser, what it does, it takes the supply side every hour and it becomes the return side.
This is the generator that all ground thaw systems utilize. It's a 7 kilowatt multi-equip generator. The fuel source from it comes from the onboard fuel tank of the unit. To start the generator, you're going to want all your switches off. You're going to want to turn your key to the start position. Once the unit is running, you're going to be able to turn your switches back on. DryAir provides an optional long run kit for these generators. We bypass the onboard oil filter and include 2 larger oil filters instead. We also include a fuel preheater and filter, and what this does is it increases the oil life from 200 hours to 1500. Once you have power at the generator and your generator switches are on, you're going to want to check that you have adequate power to the unit. Then you can turn your breakers on, which supplies power to the control panel of the unit. Your lights are going to turn on, as well as your preheater. You have 3 gauges at the top of your control panel: your supply temperature, return temperature, and system pressure. Since this is atmospherically vented, the only system pressure you're going to see is from the pump, which is around 35 PSI or less. Your switches here, your pump switch, water heater switch, and flow reverser switch. You want to turn them on one by one, make sure you have good flow, and then you can turn your water heater switch on, as well as your flow reverser. You have a series of lights here. Those are for troubleshooting purposes. Your first 6 lights will always be on when the unit's running well, and your last 2 lights will only turn on if there's an issue. So this is the internals of the control panel for the 650 GTS. We have power coming in on the breakers, which go to 120 volt relays that send power to the pump or to the rest of the control panel. We have a 12 volt transformer that supplies power to the interior lights of the unit, as well as a 24 volt transformer. 2 24 volt relays are powered by 24 volts to switch them on or off and send 120 power through the body of the relay. We have a Aquastat temperature controller. That's our main temperature controller, which is usually set at 175 to 180. We have an automatic high limit that's usually set at about 200 degrees, as well as a manual high limit that's usually set about 210 to 215. We have a timer for the flow reverser and a temperature controller for the green light on top of the unit. On the inside of the main door, we have an electrical schematic that goes over the entire wiring of the control panel, as well as a troubleshooting guide for the lights on the control panel. So preheating our Glycol. Our preheater is located in between the water heater and the fuel tank inside the unit. It's a silver tube. With your generator powering the unit, you want your main breakers on and your switches off, and that's preheating. You can feel the hot Glycol through this line up to your water heater, and the preheater itself is fairly hot. When you set up on a job site, you want to make sure that you have power to your generator and you're preheating while you're throwing hose out, so that the unit's nice and warm by the time you're ready to fire. The air and fuel preheater is located behind the control panel and above the burner. It's this black box with an air duct coming out of it. You can access it from the front access panel. It's a dual rad stacked system with an air box that gathers air from below it and pushes it upward into the ducting for the burner. Hot glycol runs through your rad here, which radiates heat into the diesel fuel above it in another separate rad, as well as the air running through that hot glycol will warm the air up. This is used to provide fuel and air that is at a constant temperature for the burner and allow it to run smoothly with less maintenance.
Coming over on the driver's side of the machine, we're going to go over some of the components that's here. Our glycol tank is here. Gauge showing that we have half full. You have your flow switch, temperature control sensor, which senses the temperature that's running through the unit, temperature control valves, your flow reverser, and your pump. So these three components, your temperature control valves, this one, what it does is it takes hot glycol from the supply side, takes it over to the return side, so you don't cold shock the system. It shuts off at 140 degrees. Your pressure bypass, this unit is so you don't deadhead the pump. This temperature control valve is what preheats your air and fuel. As this machine runs 24 hours a day, it keeps 70-degree temperatures of fuel and air in the system.
Moving on to the flow reverser. The flow reverser has an actuated motor that sits in a resting position, sending glycol through the supply side of the manifold. It gets power from the timer on the control panel, which rotates this actuated motor 90 degrees and allows the hot glycol to run to the return side instead. So it rotates every hour which side gets hot glycol and which gets the cold return glycol. This helps even any ground thaw patterns and reduces time to thaw.
We have a 2 horsepower pump, 240 volts. The power comes to this from your control panel. There's 3 seals in this pump and also a start capacitor. So at any point, if you have a problem where the pump won't come on, you always want to check your capacitor. We also have videos on how to replace the seals in the pump. So to put glycol in our system, we always want a half a tank. If it goes below half a tank, you're going to have a light on the other side that will say that we need to put glycol in the system. And how we do that is, you have your pump here, you have a fill valve here, you have a shut-off valve here. With the pump running, you can shut this valve off. You have a hose that's supplied inside the machine. You hook the hose up here, put this in a bucket of glycol, open this valve, and the pump will pull fluid in. Once you get a half a tank up here, you will shut this ball valve off, open this up, and the system will circulate the fluid. If it gets too high of glycol, we always want a half a tank. If it gets too high, it's going to come out your overflow hose here, since we're open to the atmosphere.
The onboard fuel tank's located on this small door here on the driver's side of the unit. You have your fill cap that you take off to fill the fuel tank and a gauge to see how full it is.
So going to our burner in our unit, we use Riello burners on all of our units. We have preheated fuel coming through our filter, down this line and inside of the burner. We also have our preheated air, 70 degrees, coming in to the side of the burner with a gauge showing your temperature. We also have a pressure gauge on the unit, which is preset at factory, and a reset button here to reset the burner. If the burner does not start for the first time, you want to hold this button in for 3 seconds, let out, you'll see your pressure gauge rise, and then it fires, and you'll see the needle come up to your pointed area on your gauge.
So the hose reel on the rear of the unit on the 650 has 5,000 feet of hose. The 400 similar unit has 3,000 feet. They all come in pre-charged 500 foot lengths, and you can do a maximum of 1,000 foot loop at a time. Your loops are going to connect to your quick couplers on your manifold, and you want to do 1,000 feet and come from your top manifold connection to your bottom. Keep those in line to keep everything neat. The hose reel main power comes into this box from the control panel. You have a motor speed dial, main power switch, load or unload motor operation, which controls the spin direction of the hose reel, and a belt tensioner switch, which loosens or tensions the belt of the hose reel. Your foot pedal comes off of the hose reel body and lays on the ground for you to press with your foot to allow the motor to run. We have 2 decals that explain the belt tensioning as well as your lengths of your hose when you're setting up the unit that you should be aware of. The operator manual for the unit's located in the cylindrical tube here on the hose reel. As well, you can find it on our website, www.dryair.ca. There's lots of videos for smoke testing, altitude adjustment for the burners, and any other videos for setup that you might need. You can always contact us if you have any questions. Our name and numbers are on the website as well.